So speaking about insurance and accidents, definitely was insured. Always been insured. Well, I say I've always been insured. On one of my first insurance policies, I think it might have been the one before Ensley, but what I had was this 10-month bonus accelerator thing. And so the idea was that it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it a scam, but it's a bit of a misdirect, because the idea is that you pay for this 10-month policy, and then after 10 months they give you a year's no claims. Now, what I didn't really consider was that the reason why the policy was cheaper is because it was a 10-month policy. And so the policy didn't, the policy was cheaper because you're cutting 2 months off your insurance. Now, when you get to the end of that 10 months, only that insurance company can give you the 12 months, can honor that 12 months in terms of that whole year bonus, no claims bonus. So I'm not sure if this is the same in every country, but in the UK, for every year that you have insurance, whether it be home insurance, car insurance, and various other types of insurance, for every year that you don't claim on insurance, you don't get any money back, but you do get a no claims bonus. And this no claims bonus goes towards making your insurance cheaper. And so the idea is that the longer you hold insurance continuously without claiming on it, the cheaper it should become in some ways, because what you've shown is that you are a safe and driver, and that you don't have accidents, essentially. And so the idea is that you're rewarded for that with this no claims bonus. Sometimes you can do something called protecting a no claims bonus, so you pay to protect it. I personally don't really think this, I don't really believe in it. I'm not saying don't do it, but by all means do your own research and look at it and look at the numbers. But what I kind of thought about was that, well, if I protect my no claims bonus, I only really protect it with that insurance provider, in my mind at least. Again, if I'm wrong about this, please do let me know in the chat or in the comments. But if I protect my no claims bonus and have an accident, then I still have an accident on my record. And so if I go somewhere else, even though whether my no claims bonus is protected or not, I think you don't ever lose all of it. Let's say you have 5 years of no claims bonus, you have an accident, then you go down to, I think it's 2 or 3, something like that. But you don't lose all of it, whether you protect it or not. And even in either case, you still have an accident on your record, so it still affects your insurance. So I'm not sure, it hasn't really been clear to me how I benefit from protecting it, because I still have to declare the accident when I go to get my next policy, and that still affects it negatively. So I wasn't really sure that there's a point in paying the premium to protect my no claims bonus to hopefully make my insurance a bit cheaper than it would be had I not protected it in the case of accident. I'm not really sure that the economics of it, or in the real world, it actually works out, particularly if you move between insurers. And I recommend moving between insurers, because if you stay with the same insurer, you basically get ripped off. Every year that you stay with the same insurer, generally speaking, your insurance gets more expensive. It doesn't go down. So you're not really rewarded for your loyalty. I think that might be changing in the coming years, but time will tell. But yeah, speaking about that first accident. So this is one of the things I think is, again, interesting about driving, where you get your license and you can drive on the motorway. And so one of the things that I found myself doing as someone who likes to drive was going to Sheffield. So one of my friends, a good friend of mine, he's actually had some interesting cars. I think I'll probably feature him at some point, because he's got an M4 at the moment. But yeah, he was at university. He went to Sheffield, and we went to Sheffield because road trip, why not? And on my way to Sheffield, we're on the motorway cruising in a 3-car convoy. So he's got a Fiat Punto at the front. I think it's a red one, Fiat Punto Sporting. Another friend of mine also had a Rover 214 SI. His one was green, so similar spec to mine. But I like to think mine was a bit better, because I had lowered it on MGZR springs. I had the MGZR interior. I had the aftermarket back box, and I had like a cone for air filter, so it sounded a little bit more bassy. And I also had a blue LED light in my interior. Don't judge me. But anyway, so yeah, I felt like my car was a little bit better, but that's by the by. So we're in this 3-car convoy, driving on the motorway, having a great time. I think it was my first time on the motorway. I was nervous, but also excited, because you get used to driving on the motorway after a while. But new driver. So what I was talking about is the first accident that I have. And so the first accident I had was on the motorway. I think that people should be prepared for motorway driving before they pass the test. I recognise that learning drivers on the motorway is not a great proposition, but maybe just before you have your test, there should be some way of kind of getting at least motorway driving experience. So story goes, basically, I was with a bunch of my friends. There's 3 of us in a convoy rolling to Sheffield. One of my friends goes to university at Sheffield. None of us go to university there, but we all wanted to drive because it was summertime and hey, vibes. So what happens is we're on the motorway cruising as we do. I don't think we're even speeding, but we're driving in convoy. So 3 of us are in a line, and I don't ever recommend doing this. Driving in convoy is not a great idea. So 3 of us are driving down the motorway. Definitely keeping up with traffic. Not sure how fast we're going, but I believe it was the speed limit. I believe. We hit sudden slow moving traffic, as it happens on the motorway sometimes. And so my friend who was in the car in front, which was a car in front is a Punto Sporting. I think it was like a P-Reg or something at the time. Car behind is like a T-Reg Rover 214 SI. Same car as mine, literally. Rover 214 SI 16 valve. His is green with tints. Mine is red without tints, but has modifications, so I think it's a little bit better. But that's by the by. So we're going on the motorway now. Obviously, my friend in the first car, who's experienced, sees to slow down traffic, starts to slow down. Friend in the second car starts to slow down. He's also sort of similar to me, not a particularly experienced driver, but has been driving for a little while. He's a recent driver. He starts to slow down. I start to slow down. And I just remember seeing brake lights and thinking, these cars seem to be coming up a little bit quickly. So I started to brake, but I didn't really brake hard. And again, this is me being used to driving in the city. And so at a point, I began to realize that I'm not going to stop in time. I'm not going to stop. And so I hit the brakes really hard, lock up the car, and that basically means the wheels stop moving at this point. And I didn't know that my car didn't have ABS. And so I hit the brakes. I think I remember trying to steer, but the car not doing anything. There was another time where that happened. That's a story for another time. But I remember trying to steer, thinking I can do this, and the car just was a roller skate, just went straight. And so Punto stops sensibly with space in front. Rover goes into the back of the Punto. Then my Rover goes into the back of the other Rover. Now, what's funny about this is straight away, my friend who's in the green Rover jumps out and says, no damage, everything's fine. And I'm sitting there looking at my car, and my car is anything but fine. What's good to know about my vehicle is that it previously had been accident repaired. Now, this had been repaired cheaply, is probably the best way to put it. So I think what had happened is the slam panel was broken. So the slam panel is the panel at the front of the car, which goes behind the bumper, which I suppose is called slam for a reason. But it's where the headlights are kind of housed and the radio usually goes in there. Now, this car had been damaged, and how they'd repaired it was that they basically pulled the front of the car out and I think replaced the bonnet with a new bonnet. But what I didn't realise is that, particularly on the Rover, maybe there wasn't a lot of metal in the slam panel, and maybe this is why cars have plastic slam panels now to prevent this from happening. But yeah, so the car had been pulled out, damage had been pulled out, and it cosmetically looked fine-ish, but if you lifted the bonnet, there were sort of creases, and I didn't really appreciate the gravity of what that meant, because essentially the crumple zones on my car have been compromised. And so crumple zones are parts of the car that are intentionally designed to deform in an accident. And by deform, I basically mean break, but they break in a way that's safe. It means that all the energy from the crash gets dissipated through the parts of the car which break and come apart. But the crumple zones have been compromised. So all that force went straight into the same points again. And my bonnet I remember hitting the car in front and just watching as my bonnet gradually kind of started to rise up and crinkle, and I was just like, oh no. And there's that horrible sinking feeling where you kind of get out of the car and my friend's there shouting no damage, and I'm thinking, but I can see my bonnet smash up. I don't know how bad the damage to the car is, but it feels like it was particularly bad. If you ever have hit anything in a car, it feels 10 times worse than it is often. I have my car and it's smashed. And it's interesting, I think for some reason I got the idea, like maybe I could kind of do something about this, and I basically pulled it out at the side of the road, on the motorway side, kind of pulled kind of as hard as I can and pushed the bonnet down, tried to kind of push it so it kind of all lined up, sort of ish. And so I was upset for the rest of that journey and the rest of that week, I think, while I tried to get the car sorted out. In the end I actually got it sorted out by taking it to a mechanic, and they were just kind of like, to do this properly is going to cost more than the value of the car, but they can kind of do something. So I think they undid like a bolt in the bumper, and then that allowed the bumper to kind of spring back into shape, and then pulled the slam panel out a little bit and kind of just basically which is shows the car must have been really weak because it basically kind of just like manipulated it manually to make it all kind of line up roughly again. And I think that cost it like £100 or something like that, which was quite cheap at the time. And I suppose I was pleased enough. But retrospectively, I probably should have got it either repaired properly or kind of scrapped the car at the time. Obviously, we didn't want to claim on each other's insurance because that would have just killed us all as newer drivers. A friend in the Punta was a bit of a more experienced driver, but still, their cars weren't really damaged. There was a bit of damage to the back of the Rover, my friend's car, the green one, where I'd hit it, but it's more like kind of like scuffed. It was really quite minor, and so seeing that he had the same car as me and he hit the car in front, seemingly got at the same speed, it's just that my car had really been like compromised in terms of the crushable parts of the car at the front, because his car wasn't damaged like my one was. So yeah, that was interesting. But that's all that to say. I think that this makes a strong case for new drivers doing Pass Plus, and it's something that I went and did later on. And I think it's really a worthwhile experience, particularly if you're someone that's going to be driving on the motorway a lot. But for all drivers that, you've sort of learned to drive maybe in a city, and Pass Plus was really great at providing roadcraft. Now, I wish I could remember the name of the person I did my Pass Plus with, but I remember it was a guy that was in Kingston. And I remember he had a 1 Series that was like I think it was like a 135 diesel or something like that, but it was a pretty quick car. And the registration plate was M15UMT. And I think he said that he used to work for MI5. It was M15UMT. And I think he said that he used to work for the police or MI5 or something like that. And UMT was Unusual Means Team. So I don't know if that was true or not, but I believed him. And he took me on this sort of evening, this day out through like the countrysides of like around Kingston, and went to like this pub somewhere, which was a really nice experience actually, and I really recommend people doing it. But he's a really good guy. I wish I could remember his name, and I wish I still had his details, but that was a long time ago. But when we went on this this sort of driving experience, by the time I got around to actually booking with him, I think he had changed his car from a 1 Series to a 3 Series convertible. And so this is really, it's really quite a cool idea. And so I think he was doing driving lessons for people in a 3 Series convertible. I think it was like an E46 model. The E46? It wasn't an M3. It was just a 3 Series from that kind of era. So that was really cool because I was driving this car sort of in the countryside and with the top down and stuff. And what he was showing me was like different things about roadcraft. So one of the things that you can do, for example, when you're on the motorway is like closing people. And so this is the idea that as you drive down the motorway and you get you might come across a slow moving car in the outside lane, particularly if you're anywhere in London. People seem to not understand how the motorway works, and for some reason everyone is obsessed with driving in the fastest lane as slow as possible, while the slowest lane seems to remain empty a lot of the time. And so one of the things that he taught me was that what you can do is if you're in the fast lane, you want to overtake someone who's driving slowly, as in significantly under the speed limit, you can drive up behind them, and maybe this is where sort of Audi and BMW drivers are born. But I know it's basically that you gradually close the distance between you and the car in front. And what this should show that driver is that actually you want to pass, and they will move over and let you pass. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen, so what you should do is back off. Now, for some BMW and Audi drivers, they seem to miss that second part and not back off when the person doesn't move out of the way, or they go over to undertake, which I don't recommend doing. But that said, he taught me that, and I find that generally works really well. Particularly when you get further outside of London, people seem to become more compliant and kind of understand how to use the road better. But what he also showed me was that really allowed me to enjoy country roads. And so if you're somebody like me who enjoys, shall we call it, spirited driving, and when I got the TT later on, I really took advantage of this. When you're on the country roads, he helped me to understand how to understand what the road was doing before you got there. And so observation is massively important when you're driving, of course. But what I understood from this was that if I'm driving down the road and I'm going towards... I'm driving down the road, looking at how the road meets allowed me to understand what the road was doing. And so you can look at things like the lines of trees, but also the lines of lampposts, and observing how they bend as you're driving down the road. But also, if you're approaching a bend and you look at the point where the two roads meet, if that point seems to that middle point seems to stay still, then you know it's going to be quite a tight bend and you should slow down a lot. If that point seems to continuously move, then you understand that the bend is opening up, or it's quite an open bend. And so what I was able to understand from that is that as I'm driving, it gave me a lot more confidence when being on the country road. And sometimes this can be quite a daunting thing for people who are sort of city dwellers and you're not used to driving the country roads. It feels as though you never quite know what the road's doing, particularly if you're not using like a sat nav. But even if you are, sometimes it can be a bit disconcerting. But I find it really reassuring to kind of be able to read the road ahead and recognize, okay, well, up ahead maybe I see what seems like a ring of lights, so it's probably going to be a roundabout. So I'm aware that it's a roundabout coming up. But as I'm kind of able to understand what the road's doing, I can drive the car, particularly if you're driving a slightly more sporty car. You can enjoy the car a bit within the speed limit, of course, but you can enjoy the car more because you can kind of read the road and see what it's doing before you get there. You can recognize when the bend is getting a bit tighter, it's going to be quite a sharp bend, and so you slow down a bit more. You can see when the bend's opening up, so you can get back on the power, and that was a really cool experience for me. I really enjoyed that, and so I do recommend even if you're not like a petrol head and you're not looking to, drive in a spirited fashion through the countryside, I still do encourage, particularly new drivers, to have that motorway experience, to have someone who kind of understands the more advanced points of driving and can give you some really practical tips that can help you drive in a more efficient, more effective, a more enjoyable manner as well.